Welcome to Evening Rounds, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes in medicine. Tonight, we're joined by Dr. Jerry Slater, who, along with his father, James, created the world's first hospital-based proton therapy center, where treatment has restored hope to thousands battling cancer. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Jerry?
Yes.
Welcome to Evening Rounds.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
As a young boy, were you up at night dreaming about protons and neutrons and electrons? Or talk to me about what your interests were.
Well, I was not doing that. I knew nothing about it, really. My exposure, if you want to call it, to proton therapy was kind of a little bit of a shocker. I knew a little bit about radiation. I knew that's probably what I was going to go into, which I did. But up until I was finishing my residency in Houston, I never even thought about it. Mm-hmm. And I received a phone call from my father. I was studying one night, and he called and said, the board has just okayed a plan for us to get proton. And of course, you would think, I would say, what a fabulous idea. No, my response was, why? Well, why do you want that? And because at Anderson, we were doing neutrons. And they had put a lot of investment from NCI of doing neutron therapy, and there's a lot of challenges, and it just doesn't do it because you can't control it like you can with proton. But I wasn't smart enough in reality to know the difference because they never really taught you that in our residency. It was kind of such an esoteric thing.
First, I'd like to understand when you were growing up as a child, your father and chatting, was his interest in physics and particle therapy, or how do you get from being a doctor to conceiving a new type of therapy that is being delivered to a human?
Interesting. He never intended actually to do medicine. He didn't come from a family that anybody had ever been a doctor. And so he basically had an interest in physics and ultimately got his degree as a school teacher.
Wow.
What an interesting combination.
Yeah. Well, his mother was a school teacher, an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
And so he thought, I guess I'll do that. And he actually looked around, and there was no jobs in Utah. That's where he was from. And they found that the jobs were all in Southern California. So he moved to Southern California, lived actually near Loma Linda. And one of his neighbors said, have you ever thought about medicine? He's like,
what
no.
a life-changing conversation would be with your neighbor.
I mean, would that happen in 2025?
No.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know my neighbor's names.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this person just said, and he was a physician at Loma Linda.
And he just saw that in your dad.
Saw that in them and said, you ought to look into it. So he did, and ultimately went back to college to do all the prerequisites for it. But he was prior to that, was a physics teacher at Fontana Junior High.
Ah, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's how we got to California and the whole story started.
So the call is from your dad that he got board approval to do proton, and you say, why?
Yeah. I love how you just totally shot him down on that.
Well, he turned around and shot me down. His response was, I'll send you something. He sent me a physics textbook.
Oh, my goodness.
And he said, read these chapters on there. So,
Once a physics teacher, always a physics teacher.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to explain it to you. You're going to learn it.
Okay, and so you did.
I did. And we had discussions on it. And up to that point, I never had a plan of coming back to Loma Linda, primarily because I just never thought I'd want to come back and work for my parents.
Yeah.
As a young kid,
Create your own path.
Yeah, and do that. So I had no intention of that for exactly that reason, because he was doing it, so I would probably want to find my own deal.
Yeah.
And when he did that, and I said, yeah, that sounds interesting, he said, well, if you're interested, I want you to go get some training in it. And that's when I decided to do my fellowship back in Boston.
So what kind of training was available if it was if it was a brand new technology?
Well, there was places in the world actually doing proton therapy in the laboratory.
Okay.
And they were accelerators. Like the one I used at Harvard when we were there was essentially built after World War II, basically for physics experiments. And
so not to treat cancers.
Not to treat. It wasn't designed around doing that. But they had done some adaptions on there to do some studies and found it seemed to have some promises, but they never really had at least vocalized an intention to take it beyond that point. It was kind of a institutional project. And there was another one in South Africa doing it, but never to the point of doing that. What he wanted to do is bring it into routine medical care. And that's really what changed it, because you went from this interesting project that gets a lot of funding and this and that to do it, to basically saying, why don't we make it mainstream therapy? And nobody was doing that anywhere. So at Boston, I basically learned the process of what they were doing, how they did it, everything from positioning, the planning of it, the targeting of it, and that part of it, and brought that back at.
So without giving me a physics lessons, because it would probably be very lost on me, can you tell us just a little bit about proton beam therapy? What does that mean for me as a patient?
Well, I think the easiest is to start a little bit with what photon or X-ray therapy was, what pretty much everybody gets around the world. And that's using X-rays, which are just packets of energy, no mass, no anything to them. And so it's like when you get an X-ray, you shoot the beam in and it comes out the other side and exposes the film. We just use real high energy X-rays to kill cancer, but it does go all the way through and comes out the other side, which means it's hitting a lot of things that aren't necessary. And that's the biggest disadvantage of it, is because you got a lot of normal tissue that doesn't need anything, but you don't have any way to control it. So with protons, the idea behind it is because it's got a heavy mass, which X-rays have no mass, and it has a charge of a positive charge. That allows it to be controlled, where you can now control where it gives off its energy in the patient and where it stops. And you can stop it within a few millimeters of wherever you want. Now, that idea, I should say, came from, his name was Dr. Robert Wilson. And if you look up in the thing of Dr. Robert Wilson, he was part of the Oppenheimer thing on the atomic bomb. And he basically wrote a paper in 1946 saying they were trying to figure out something good that would come out of all that work they did. And he said, I think somebody ought to consider using protons for cancer therapy.
Wow.
And so my father grasped onto that early on. And ultimately, when we got the facility going and treating patients, we brought Dr. Wilson here. Our gantry, in one of our gantries, is actually named after him with a plaque on the wall. Yeah. And he was very much on that because it allowed him to see what they had worked on actually could benefit mankind.
Yeah.
Save lives, yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
What the atomic bomb, but then he's recognizing there are healing potentials from this otherwise used to end wars and have mass destruction.
Yeah.
So Jerry, I want people who are listening to this to understand the magnitude of what this project was for Loma Linda. As a kid, I remember driving to church on Barton Road and looking to my right and seeing this huge hole right next to what we call our Hinshaw Towers now. Talk a bit about the whole assembly and build of Proton, government, Illinois, California. Walk us through that, because this was a massive undertaking.
Yeah, when we looked at getting a machine, we wanted it, and there was nobody making one. None of the manufacturers had any interest in doing it. My father ended up going to Fermi Lab, which is the Department of Energy lab that actually was first designed and built by the same Robert Wilson, who was the head of that lab. And he went there, and they happened to be shutting their machine down to do maintenance on it. And their machine is the one that's 4 miles around. And that's...
The proton has to
travel 4 miles around. It's for high energy physics and things like that. So he approached them on, could you do it? And they said, yeah, they'd be very interested in doing that. They have a lot of people with nothing to do for a while. So they worked with it of getting the specifications and designing it and building it back there at Fermilab. For them, as they use the thing, this is like asking Boeing to build a little Cessna. This is just a mini version of the big one that we have. And so we got it built back there, got it running reasonably well. Then it was totally disassembled, packed up into semi-trucks, trucked across the country from Aurora, Illinois to Loma Linda, and reassembled in the hospital, and then trying to get things up and running.
So when it got reassembled, you just flip a light switch and we're treating patients?
No, actually, it was a challenge on there of there's one thing you can get a beam out, and another thing getting a beam out that's a quality to treat a patient. And they had tested that back at Fermilab and said, okay, it seems like it will work, but let's get it to Loma Linda because we really need to move things along. So but there were a lot of challenges of getting the beam out of Loma Linda when it was out here ready, and a lot of worries over a couple of months of it.
So what was going on? The beam was just going around. It was a football field size, right? Or
It's a little smaller. It's only about 30 feet across in diameter.
So the beam is traveling at the speed of light,
basically, yeah.
round and round and round and round, and you're trying to figure out how to get a quality beam out of that and into a gantry.
Yeah, because it's so difficult to kind of take protons out and say, go down this pathway.
Because they're kind of moving fast.
They're moving very fast, and it's the thing that pulls them out, the magnets and everything that do that have to be set just right. So you'll have billions of protons circulating in there, and when they get in a certain point, it peels off certain ones when they have the energy and send it down there. That is probably the hardest thing to do. It's easy to make protons. It's hard to get them to do that. And that took, matter of months, bringing in an outside group to get that doing. And after a few months.
And what was the announcement your dad made to the radiation department?
Well, we were having some kind of a function, and he just got up there, and it was kind of, in retrospect, he's like, we just landed on the moon. He said, we basically got beam out of the machine.
We got beam.
Yep.
Wow.
And everybody knew what that meant. It was such a
That's amazing.
big thing, yeah.
You cavalierly just walked through a little bit that I think is in your human nature, and I'm going to make you dig it out a little bit. Basically, as I think about this, you have this amazing technology that can heal people. But the secret sauce in all of this is how do you take that technology, harness it for quote unquote mass production so that you can treat more than 2 or 3 patients a day because it won't take an hour and a half, 2 hours to set it up, to get the beam positioned right. So as I think about it, your dad may have brought the therapy here, but really what you've done, and I want you to talk to us about this, you've allowed thousands of patients to be treated with this therapy because of the operational efficiencies that you've brought to the treatment of treatment of patients with proton.
Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, when we were discussing when I was going to be coming back to Loma Linda, we're planning on treating 100 patients a day and this and that. And I'm up there looking at their system and saying, okay, we do 6 a day, and it's a full day's worth of work. And so, obviously, I started looking at every step of what was doing and saying, how can we potentially modify that? Why does it take an hour to prepare for a next patient on doing that? And so it's basically you broke every component down from patient alignment, patient in the positioning, calibration of the machine, all of those steps to actually delivering the beam.
How did you do that?
Yeah. What technology did you bring to that?
The biggest thing we did actually was get rid of the x-rays. I mean, now everybody's used to digital x-rays. There's no digital x-rays. We were basically using film, developing it, and running back and forth. So we made a big push to say, we need to develop this. We had a simple system at Harvard, but it wasn't a real strong system. So actually our engineering team developed a digital imaging system that basically was built into the gantry. And it had a computerized thing that allowed us to help us to position a patient. We would measure it off on a computer instead of a piece of film, and the computer would then say, X, Y, and Z need to go these directions to get the patient on the target.
That's a big deal when you think about computers back then.
Yeah. It took a while to develop that, but it really, we instantly were able to increase throughput by a factor of 3.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Speaking of discovering, I feel like there's so much happening now. There's so much, obviously, that we've done to pioneer this technology, but there's a really new, exciting future for proton therapy that you guys are exploring. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the field has grown immensely since then, and the technology has. We like to be more on the cutting edge of doing some of this. So there's it's been out a couple of years talking about it. It's still a project to do, but it's taking radiation and basically throwing out all the rules of what we do which is you give it slow, you give it over a long period of time, it allows the body to recover from the injury that I do today, usually 6 to 8 hours, it's recovered and you can actually do more, which is why they're here for weeks and weeks and on there, is just for the normal tissue to fix itself. And so the way is if you give it too fast, your risk of side effects go dramatically higher. So this thing came out where some researchers were just kind of doing things and started giving doses of radiation that, we talk about 40 gray, which is 4 to 5 weeks worth of radiation in a microsecond. Yeah, I mean, it's a boom to get that. Well, there hadn't been anything that would allow you to do it. Well, there were some machines built for just research and things that could suddenly give these kinds of doses. And so they started doing experiments on there. They realized a phenomenon. They still haven't figured 100% of what's causing it. But one is that you hit the cancer so hard, so fast, that one of the things that radiation to be effective is that you have oxygen. That is what kind of makes the damage permanent. And so one of the theories is that you give the radiation so quickly that you basically make a hypoxic environment for the normal tissue. Because hypoxic environment is bad for the cancer because that means you won't kill it.
Yeah.
But it creates this thing where you give it so fast that the normal tissue can't.
So it's almost like it creates a shield around the normal patient.
It's
a normal tissue.
That's one of the theories. There's a couple of others out there. Nobody knows the details, but that's what we're really looking
When
at.
you talk about flash, it is really the speed at which it hits it.
It is. It's so different that, we look at it and say, that goes totally against how physics works and biology. And so, that really gets my interest, of doing that. And so that's kind of what we're...
And is that a 1 or 2 day treatment? Or is that do we even know how many treatments a patient would need for that?
Assuming it's one. So you take 6 to 8 weeks and do it in a microsecond.
So they could fly in on Southwest on a Thursday morning. You see them Thursday afternoon.
I like how you're seeing ahead.
Treat them on a Friday and they're back at home playing golf on the weekend?
Theoretically. That's assuming we can plan them and get it specified. That's really going to be the key because that's now a magnitude greater than what we do now.
And I guess the risk of being off just a little bit is exponentially magnified
exactly.
too.
So now some of the new machines are coming out would allow us to test it. And that's what we'll be
That's great.
Having here.
So let's talk a little bit about the community that's been generated from proton therapy. Yeah. It's a unique therapy because it's multiple treatments condensed over a 4 or 5 week period, right? So people will come in from all over the U.S. and the world for therapy. So talk to us a little bit about when they come to Loma Linda and they're going to go through proton, what's the program like for patients?
Well, we never really knew it was going to have so many people coming from out of the region. So we weren't honestly prepared for it. And once we did, after a couple of years, realizing, okay, 50 to 70% of our patients are not from Southern California. They're coming here, needing places to stay, needing this and that. And what are they going to do? Loma Linda is not the most active place to do things. We got a group together to really say, how can we give them something to do? They're here, their cancer's bad enough, but let's do that. And part of this fell under Dr. Lynn Martell when he was here doing it. He got the group, did everything from, every day there's almost something going on. They got them all logged into Drayson Center. Once a week, they would all go to a restaurant. He was a golfer, and so were a lot of these guys. And they would go golfing in different days. It was just kind of came to the thing of what do they call it? The proton vacation.
Yeah,
because
radiation vacation.
The radiation vacation, where they came in here, but it had such an impact of not just the treatment. They were surprised that they could do all these things in the middle of their treatment. And it just, that we had a couple of them early on in 2000-ish who were there and kind of said they didn't want to leave and not see all these other people. One of them was the East Coast and one was West Coast. And so that's where they formed this club that's called Brotherhood of the Balloon, or Bob, and we're a way of keeping in touch. And it just got more and more momentum. And I think now they've got over 10,000 members from all over the country.
So there's always a backstory behind the name. and prostate cancer affects men. So I understand the brotherhood. Where does the balloon part of the name come from?
Well, one of the things that we do to try and protect normal tissues, and particularly the rectum, is right next to the prostate and is really the biggest organ. So we want to move it away from it a bit and separate out part of the rectum and move it out of the field. And so we actually use as a balloon filled with water to expand the rectum and move the posterior part of the rectum farther away. Every patient got that for every treatment, and they kind of use that as their little rally call because they all got the balloon, and that's really where they came up with the name.
And so it's very meaningful to the community, but may not actually be. There may not be the community awareness for why is that called the balloon?
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think they've really expanded beyond that. I know they have a lot of different members who've, breast cancer treatment, all the different modalities you guys treat. And I think it's really amazing that it is a camaraderie. It is something that really bonds all them together.
Well, and let's talk just a moment about that. We've talked about their early treatments of spinal tumors and posterior skull-based tumors and prostate. But what other things do you use proton beam therapy for?
One of the largest ones is actually children's cancer, pediatric. The idea behind that is they are so susceptible to radiation injury, much more than adults are. And it's really now considered the treatment of choice in this country and going more around the world that they're actually referred to proton centers when they do need the radiation. Other things, a lot of head and neck cancer, lung cancer, and breast. And some abdominal, even liver metastasis and things like that. So it's growing all the time. Some of it's related to the technology. Can we, in our system, treat that? I think our new one will allow us to treat a lot of these areas that we can't for more technical reasons. Something more than being a survivor of cancer comes as a result of it.
Yeah. I've been blessed, and 150 years ago, I was your marketing specialist a very long time ago.
Wow, you hide your age well. 150 years ago.
It was a very long time ago, but I just remember I had such an opportunity in that position to talk to so many of these patients and to be able to hear them say, my life has been changed by my time at Loma Linda, not just because obviously my cancer has been cured, but because I learned how to eat. I learned how to be in fellowship and community with my fellow member. And I will always value the time that I had at Loma Linda. And you think just what you said, that you had this really difficult, really scary probably diagnosis. And now you have this community, and they share stories, and they are in constant contact. They meet up. And it's really beautiful that the technology and the healing care that you have helped to pioneer here has transformed so many lives in such a really deep way.
As physicians, we often look at patients as people going through therapy or people receiving treatment. There's nothing like being a patient to appreciate what patients go through when you are a treating physician. Some of us have stories of being a patient, and I'm curious to know, have you had any life events that have impacted you as a physician by being a patient?
Yes, unfortunately, I have. It was a Christmas Day about 10 years ago. My wife and I decided to, all the family was elsewhere. Okay, let's go we have a little place up in the mountains in Utah. Let's go up there for Christmas. We get up there, it's snowing like crazy. So I've got to now plow out my driveway and do all of this. And my wife is parked up the road. I'm walking up to the car. It's blizzard, so you're kind of looking down, not able to look straight ahead. And out of nowhere, I just heard this guy yelling, "Look out." And I'm hearing a horn honk, and I just kind of look up and see the side of a car. And he's spinning out of control. It was interesting. I've been asked, so, what did you think? What went through your head? And what went through my head was, ow, this is going to hurt.
Oh, no.
And I was hit kind of broadside with the car, threw me about 30 feet on there, ended up breaking my pelvis in 2 areas and 6 ribs and things like that. It was just, he had ice coming around a corner. And so, getting to the hospital, going through the trauma, you're in the ER, and all of the 30 doctors running around you, checking you and doing that, scans, all of this and that. And next morning going into the operating room and stuff like that, it changed things. But it really showed the team which really impressed me, starting rehab day 2. It's like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And yet you understand that. They're like, no, you need to stand up. And I'm like, I want to lie here and do nothing.
So the ouch did come to fruition.
It did. The thing that saved me?
The snow?
I went through, there was a 6-foot wall of snow, and I just plowed all the way through it. It felt like, people asked, what does it feel like? It's when you go to the beach and that big wave comes and it's just knocking you this and that. And that was what it was. It's like, at some point, I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
But in that, I see that place all the time. In the summer, it's a boulder field. Would have been a different outcome in the summer. So I just have to, count blessings on that as saying it happened.
Yeah.
I landed in snow. Even though it did all of that damage, I had a nice, soft, relatively good landing on there.
So was the guy that said, watch out, was the guy that was spinning out of control?
Yeah. Young kid. He worked at the ski resort.
Talk about a helpless feeling, right?
It was. I must say, what he did as far as after he hit, people asked me, well, what did you do in this and that? And I said, he was the person that I was really very thankful for because he didn't leave. He gave me his coat. He did all these things. I said, can you go get my wife there? He says, no, I'm not leaving you. He called his supervisor at the ski resort, called the EMTs, everybody, and just stayed there the whole time. And then called my wife the next day to see how I was doing, and then was told, don't talk to him anymore because you're going to get sued. Which it wasn't that situation, but it was, I used that to say, I hope my kids would do that.
Absolutely.
To sit there and do that and basically have that,
And isn't that an incredible response from someone of the ski resort or whatever to say, don't call Dr. Slater's wife because they may sue you as a result, and your communication with them is going to provide fodder for lawyers. And it's ridiculous.
It is. And I would love to meet the kid now.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, no, it's all closed off and you can't do that because, it was an accident. I believe it was an accident. It was bad weather. He was about my kid's age. And I'm thinking, what is that going to do to him mentally? He already feels bad enough. Because so many people say, well, did you go after him? No, I had no interest in going after him because he made a mistake with an accident or whatever. But he stayed with it. Now, one thing if he drove down this thing and said, you're on your own.
Yeah.
But no, he basically did that. So I have to appreciate that.
I love that. I love that you see it from a dad's perspective of him being the same age as your kids and you hoping that your kids would do the same.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
When you think about evening rounds, our podcast is called Evening Rounds, and it was intentional and the reflection that we have as physicians every single day. When you think about evening rounds in your own practice and in your own life, what does that mean to you?
I think a lot of it is what we talked about, whole person care. I mean, this is another way of getting to the patients, maybe educating them or giving them hope or something like that, which I think is very important. I mean, in our field, it's extremely scary for patients. And the opportunity to have ways of communicating, keeping them up to date or what new is going on, hope, whatever else, I think is a vital part of what we do in the cancer field.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you. Certainly am grateful for you spending time with us today, and certainly grateful for the contributions you've made towards the treatment of cancer and will continue to make as we move forward, as we continue to redefine and push the limits of radiation therapy and treatment of cancer and other diseases. So thank you very much, Jerry.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
A special thanks to the sponsor of Evening Rounds, La Loma, who has provided banking services to the Loma Linda community since 1955. Their support helps us continue bringing you episodes focused on health, story, and mission.